Two dates on a calendar. The first date is September 17th, 1985. On that day, a 30-year-old man named Steve Jobs submitted a letter of resignation to the board of directors of Apple Computer, Incorporated. He was, at the time, the chairman of the company he had co-founded 9 years earlier in a garage in Cupertino, California. 12 years and 1 day later, September 16th, 1997, the same Steve Jobs was named interim chief executive officer of Apple Computer, Incorporated. In the intervening period, the same company was run by 3 different CEOs. Its market share in the personal computer industry fell from approximately 12% to approximately 3%. Its net losses in the 2 fiscal years leading up to Jobs' return totaled approximately $1.9 billion. In the fall of 1996, according to statements Jobs made after his return, the company had less than 90 days of cash remaining before insolvency. Today's autopsy is not on Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, professionally speaking, walked out of Apple in 1985 and walked back in 12 years later, and eventually became CEO of the most valuable company in the world before his death in 2011. He is not on this table. What is on this table is the specific Apple that existed between September 17, 1985 and September 16, 1997. That patient, 12 years exactly, died in 1996. What emerged the next year had the same name. It was, in every operational sense, a different company. I'm Mort. I do autopsies on dead empires. This one required 12 years to finish dying. Let's open it up. Apple Computer Company was founded on April 1st, 1976, in Cupertino, California, by 3 men: Steve Jobs, 21 years old, Steve Wozniak, 25, and Ronald Wayne, an engineer at Atari. Wayne sold his 10% stake back to Jobs and Wozniak for $800 12 days later. The Apple I, designed and hand-built by Wozniak, was the company's first product. The Apple II, introduced in 1977, became one of the best-selling personal computers of the decade. Apple Computer Incorporated went public in December of 1980. At the initial public offering, Steve Jobs, age 25, was worth approximately $256 million. In January of 1984, Apple launched the Macintosh, introduced with a Super Bowl commercial directed by Ridley Scott that has become one of the most referenced advertisements in the history of American television. The Macintosh was the technological achievement of Steve Jobs' first tenure at Apple. It was also, unexpectedly, a commercial disappointment. Sales after the initial launch dropped sharply. Software developers were slow to build for the platform. The Macintosh division, which Jobs personally led, began to run at operating losses. By late 1984, Apple's board had begun to ask whether Steve Jobs was the right person to be running an operating division of a public company. A year and a half earlier, Jobs had personally persuaded the president of PepsiCo's soft drink division, a man named John Sculley, to leave Pepsi and become the CEO of Apple. Jobs' documented pitch, spoken to Sculley in a Manhattan apartment in 1983, has become one of the most quoted business recruitment lines in American history. Quote, "Do you want to sell sugared water for the rest of your life? Or do you want to come with me and change the world?" Sculley took the job, and by the spring of 1985, Sculley had concluded, per his own documented memoir, that the Macintosh division needed to be run by somebody other than Steve Jobs. There is a specific structural problem that appears frequently in the corporate history of founder-led technology companies. The problem is this: the qualities that make a founder capable of building a company from nothing: obsessive vision, willingness to disregard advice, willingness to break with market conventions, willingness to bet the company on unproven ideas, are precisely the qualities that make founders difficult to manage in a public company that has fiduciary obligations to shareholders, quarterly reporting requirements, and professional management expectations. The founder's productive traits are, from the perspective of a board of directors serving public shareholders, structural risks. The board's options are: tolerate the founder's risk profile in exchange for the founder's vision, hire a professional CEO, and hope the founder will accept a secondary role, or, in extremis, remove the founder from operational authority. Apple's board in the spring of 1985 chose option 3. What follows is what happens when you remove the founder from the company that was designed around the founder's particular obsessions. April 10th, 1985. Apple's board of directors convened for a scheduled meeting at the company's Cupertino headquarters. The agenda that day included, per the documented public reporting, a reorganization proposal put forward by John Sculley. Sculley's proposal was that Steve Jobs be removed from his role as executive vice president and general manager of the Macintosh division and reassigned to a strategic role in new product development. A role that, in practical terms, would have removed him from all operational authority at the company. Sculley, per his own documented memoir and multiple contemporaneous accounts, presented the board with a stark choice. He would resign as CEO unless the board removed Jobs from operational leadership. The meeting continued through that day and into the following day. On April 11th, the board voted. The board sided unanimously with Sculley. Jobs was stripped of his responsibilities for the Macintosh division. He retained the title of chairman but was given no operating role. He was assigned an office, documented in multiple contemporaneous accounts, in a remote part of the Apple campus. He referred to it, publicly and privately, as Siberia. For weeks he came to the office, sat alone, and was not invited to product meetings, strategy meetings, or engineering reviews. On May 23, 1985, while Sculley was in China on a business trip, Jobs attempted to organize what has been documented in multiple accounts as a boardroom coup, an effort to persuade board members and senior executives to remove Sculley and reinstate Jobs as head of operations. Jobs approached Apple executive Jean-Louis Gasset, a French-born product development executive who Jobs believed would support him. Gasset instead informed Sculley of the attempted coup. Sculley returned from China. On Friday, May 31st, 1985, press release announcing Jobs' formal removal from all operating responsibilities, the company's first quarterly loss in its history, and significant layoffs. Jobs remained as chairman with no operating role. He came to the Siberia office in the summer. On September 17th, 1985, Steve Jobs submitted his letter of resignation to the Apple Board of Directors. He was 30 years old. He had, at the initial public offering 5 years earlier, been worth approximately $256 million. 5 senior Apple employees resigned during that same period and joined him in the founding of a new company called Next. The specific irony of the events of April through September 1985 is documented and worth naming precisely. 2 years earlier, in 1983, Steve Jobs had personally traveled to New York, met with John Sculley in Manhattan, and persuaded Sculley to leave the presidency of PepsiCo's soft drink division to become the CEO of Apple. Jobs had personally overridden the recommendations of Apple's existing executive search process. Jobs had personally negotiated Sculley's compensation package. Jobs had personally introduced Sculley to the board. And in April of 1985, the CEO, Steve Jobs, had personally recruited, walked into a boardroom meeting, and told the board of directors he would resign unless Jobs was removed from operations. The board voted with Sculley. Jobs, in the 8 months between April and September of 1985, gave John Sculley's Apple everything it needed to fire him: the recruitment introduction, the compensation package, the boardroom relationships, and in September, the letter of resignation that ended the founder's 12-year exile. Watch. Steve Jobs founded Next Computer, incorporated in October of 1985, 1 month after his resignation. In 1986, he purchased the Graphics Group, the computer graphics division of Lucasfilm, later renamed Pixar Animation Studios, for approximately $10 million in total capital and acquisition costs. Meanwhile, at Apple, John Sculley's tenure continued. Under Sculley's leadership, Apple grew through the late 1980s, reached record revenues in the early 1990s, and in 1993, launched the Apple Newton, an early personal digital assistant that Sculley personally championed. The Newton was a commercial and critical disaster. In June of 1993, the Apple board dismissed John Sculley. His replacement was Michael Spindler, a German-born executive who had run Apple's European operations, nicknamed Diesel in the trade press. Spindler's tenure was brief and consequential. In January of 1995, under Spindler, Apple launched what has been documented as the Mac Clone Program, a licensing program that allowed third-party manufacturers to build Macintosh-compatible hardware. The theory was that clone manufacturers would grow the Macintosh ecosystem, the way IBM-compatible clones had grown the personal computer industry generally in the 1980s. The actual outcome was that clone manufacturers, including Power Computing, Motorola, and Umax, aggressively priced their Mac-compatible hardware, cannibalized Apple's own hardware sales, and captured share within the existing Macintosh market rather than expanding it. Apple's hardware margins collapsed. Spindler was dismissed in 1996. His replacement was Gil Amelio, a former CEO of National Semiconductor, brought in as CEO in February of 1996. Amelio inherited a company that was hemorrhaging money. In fiscal year 1996, Apple reported a net loss of approximately $867 million. In the first fiscal quarter of 1997, Apple reported a net loss of approximately $740 million in a single quarter. In the second quarter, another $708 million. Full year, fiscal 1997, net losses totaled approximately $1.045 billion. Apple's share of the personal computer market had fallen from approximately 12% in 1985 to approximately 3% by 1997. Amelio, per his own documented memoir titled On the Firing Line, believed that Apple's core strategic problem was its aging Macintosh operating system, which needed to be replaced by a modern operating system foundation. Apple's internal Copeland project to build the new operating system had failed. The board directed Amelio to identify an outside operating system to acquire. Amelio initially explored acquiring B Incorporated, an operating system company founded by Jean-Louis Gasset, the same Apple executive who had informed Sculley of Jobs' May 1985 coup attempt 12 years earlier. B Incorporated's asking price was approximately $300 million. Amelio's team judged the price too high. They turned instead to Next. On December 20th, 1996, Apple announced it would acquire Next for approximately $427 million. Steve Jobs, 12 years after his resignation, was returning to Apple as an advisor to Gil Amelio. He did not remain an advisor. Over the 7 months following the acquisition, Jobs, per multiple documented accounts, quietly rebuilt his relationships with the Apple board, inserted Next executives into Apple positions, and prepared the political ground for what would happen next. In late June 1997, Jobs sold approximately 1.5 million shares of the Apple stock he had received in the Next acquisition for approximately $22.5 million. The sale was publicly disclosed. Apple's share price, already trading near a 12-year low, fell further on the news. On July 9, 1997, the Apple board removed Gil Amelio as CEO. Amelio's tenure had lasted approximately 17 months. On September 16, 1997, 1 day short of the 12th anniversary of his resignation, Steve Jobs was named interim CEO of Apple Computer, Incorporated. 2 weeks before that, on August 6, 1997, at the Macworld Boston conference, Jobs announced that Microsoft Corporation would invest $150 million in Apple stock, would ship Microsoft Office for the Macintosh for the next 5 years, and would settle all outstanding intellectual property disputes between the two companies. Bill Gates appeared on a giant screen behind Jobs on the Macworld stage. The audience, per contemporaneous documented accounts, booed. Jobs later described the Gates on the giant screen decision as, per his documented direct quote, "my worst and stupidest staging mistake of my life." Apple, per Jobs' own documented account, had approximately 90 days of cash remaining at that moment. On September 16, 1997, Steve Jobs was named interim CEO of Apple Computer, Incorporated. His first strategic decisions, per multiple documented accounts, were operational triage. He canceled the Newton product line. He canceled the Copeland operating system project. He canceled the Mac clone licensing program, forcing the clone manufacturers out of the Mac-compatible business over the following 12 months. He reduced Apple's product line, per his own documented public statements, from approximately 15 product families to 4. He accepted the $150 million Microsoft investment. He negotiated the 5-year Microsoft Office commitment. He hired a new advertising agency and, on September 28, 1997, launched a brand campaign called Think Different, a campaign built entirely around the recognition of visionary founders whose willingness to disregard convention had produced world-changing outcomes. The campaign, whether intended as such or not, was a public rehabilitation of the founder profile that Apple's 1985 board had considered too risky to run an operating division. In 1998, Apple launched the iMac, the first product designed under Jobs' returning leadership. In 2000, Jobs formally became CEO without the interim title. In 2001, Apple launched the iPod. In 2003, the iTunes Store. In 2007, the iPhone. In 2011, the iPad. In August of 2011, Jobs resigned as CEO due to health reasons. On October 5, 2011, he died. That same year, Apple briefly became the most valuable publicly traded company in the world. The Apple that Jobs returned to lead was not, in any meaningful operational sense, the same Apple that had fired him in 1985. The board that had fired him was mostly gone. The management team that had presided over the 12-year decline was gone. The product philosophy was different. The negotiating philosophy was different. The strategic partner set was different. Microsoft was now a critical partner, not a mortal rival. The company that emerged from September 16, 1997, had the same name and used the same physical buildings. It was, in every operational sense, a new company built on the corpse of the old one. So let me record the cause of death. For the file, the Apple that existed between September 17, 1985 and September 16, 1997. 12 years exactly, minus 1 day. Died in 1996 under the leadership of Gil Amelio at a market share of approximately 3%, with approximately 90 days of cash remaining. What survived was not that patient. What survived was a distinct successor entity that shared the corpse's name, used the corpse's buildings, and was, upon its September 16th arrival, a genuinely different company. Cause of death: the removal of a company's founder from operational authority produced 12 years of professional management decisions that were individually rational and collectively catastrophic. Method: 3 CEOs in 10 years, market share collapse from 12% to 3%, cumulative net losses in the final 2 fiscal years of approximately $1.9 billion, and 1 strategic misstep: the Mac clone program that individually converted a struggling company into a nearly insolvent one. Time of death, the fiscal quarter ending September 1996, when the cash runway math became terminal. The paperwork caught up in July of 1997, when Gil Amelio was removed. The Apple that fired Steve Jobs in 1985 was dead. The Apple that rehired him in 1997 was a new company that took the same name. That's another one for the shelf. The next time you sit on a board of directors of a public company whose founder is difficult to manage, unwilling to accept professional management authority, and whose founder's risk profile makes shareholders uncomfortable, ask yourself one question. Is the company you are trying to protect from the founder's risk actually the same company without the founder's risk? Or is it a different company, one whose product philosophy, market position, and strategic identity were built around the specific obsessions of the person you are considering removing? If the answer is that the company is fundamentally the founder's company, that its distinctive market position was created by the founder's specific personality, then removing the founder does not preserve the company. Removing the founder produces a different company operating under the same name, and the different company may or may not be able to compete in the market the original founder created. Apple's board, in April of 1985, made the choice to protect shareholders from Steve Jobs' risk profile. 12 years later, the company they had protected was 90 days from bankruptcy. The founder they had removed returned to run it. The company they had protected did not survive. If you want to watch the next autopsy, you know where the door is. I'll leave the light on.